Hello once again, everyone. So I wanted to take the time to do just one big video this week and go over some of the armor drills that we've been using, as I record them for internal use but never really went over them for external use. And so I've got a couple of my guys here to help me. I'm going to showcase them at their most base level, and then we're going to work up from there. So what these are designed to do is these are all skills that, one, you can practice in very, very little gear. Jake here's probably in the most gear with the Aventail helmet, jack chain, and gauntlets. I'm obviously wearing just gauntlets, an open-faced helmet so I can talk to you, but absolutely practicing these. Randy's just in a fencing mask with breastplate and gauntlets. You could also do this in standard HEMA gear without much difficulty, or more armor if you want to, but I would say this is the bare minimum for really getting the most out of these exercises. But either way, let's talk about them and go from there. So, our first game is going to be called Follow the Leader. The way this is going to work is you're going to switch roles, but predetermined lead, predetermined follow. Now you can move in through a bunch of different positions, but usually it's best to go ahead and go into a half sword position. And you can, usually for starting off, especially if you're wearing closed helmets, go ahead and have that slight contact. Now we're not pushing against each other, they're just touching, because when you're blind, that's what you're going to be feeling off of. Now, we're not looking for a one-for-one. All I'm looking for is if I step, Jake is vaguely keeping close to me, right? I can take any sort of step I want, and Jake is just in general keeping away. Now you'll notice he's not going straight backward. That's because, as you may have noticed by the cones, you should practice this in a limited area. As fighting in the field is one thing, but when it comes to one-on-one, where this is really going to be vital, you're going to be in a limited field. You're going to be in a list. And as such, if Jake just continues to back up every time I advance, all of a sudden he's out the door, and I will win instantly. So, think of it a bit like sumo, right? He wants to maintain his back to the center line as much as possible. Now, sometimes that can lead into different techniques. So, for example, if Jake's pushing me, right, I can switch sides to get some movement, move around behind him and off to the side. We'll be seeing more of that when we get into one of our later games. Another option would be, as he's pushing me forward, I overbind to push myself away from that pressure. Now Jake is going to be much more inclined to swing beneath me, or things along those lines. These are all things you can work with. But basically, the idea here with this movement is just to shuffle around, etc. So, we're going to have Randy come and jump in, and they're going to play a quick game of Follow the Leader. We'll go ahead and have Jake lead. All right, just move him around, begin. Now, it's important to note they're not competing with each other here. Randy's just moving based off of Jake's stimulus, taking ground or giving ground. Sometimes Jake will change positions or change sides. It's all just about Randy working within the designated box. All right, halt. Good. Now, nice and straightforward. You can also make this more complicated, but we'll get back to that in a minute. In general, though, mark out a decent sized area. For sake of camera, we have this a lot smaller than we would normally want it to be, but you do want at least 2 markations of, hey, don't go past this point. Otherwise, this can quickly turn into hurting you, actually. But I digress. Okay, so now let's move on to our next game. This is going to be called Double-Bitted Stick. Now, these first 2 games are meant to be things that, like, they're your base level skills, right? For Double-Bitted Stick, you're going to start off with your left foot slightly forward, but in general, you're in a relative horse stance. If you are left-handed, you will want your right foot slightly forward. But you're going to take your sticks, in this case, wooden swords are great. You want something firm, wasters, dowels, anything that is going to be stiff. You can work up to using steels with this, but for right now, we want something that's not going to flex on us. You're going to just make gentle connective contact. You do not want to be leaning on each other here. This is about holding what I've got, not applying too much pressure. Now the goal of this game is, as we're here, I've got kind of a middle bind, right? If I move my arms up toward his right hand, I can move that. Move my arms down toward where his actual right hand is, I can move that. If I push my tip forward, I get that. If I push my pommel forward, I get that. So it's kind of an X. You want to get a sense for how to bind in these, kind of 4 dimensions and exploit what you get, right? Now, your main targets here are going to be getting your point online, or alternatively, causing him to have to take a step. So examples of this could be, for example, if I'm bringing my point over here and he keeps reinforcing, push with your cross guard or what have you underneath his armpit to get him moving. You could also push so your pommel's in front of him and just push straight back. Alternatively, if he's more worried about this and is bringing his arm super down, just work your point in there A very good one will be if he's really pressing super hard, hook over with your cross guard and just make him step that way. These are all things you can figure out kind of moment of, but the object is to get him to move, not necessarily to do this with great speed, because if you try to blitz this, you're going to end up stepping. You want this to be nice and relaxed as you're moving together. You're just looking for opportunities and keeping yourself relatively, yeah, there we go. No one actually threatened each other there. It's just that I had better positioning, so he was forced to take a step. This can become more advanced with time, as you can then start allowing yourself to take little bits of movement. Nothing bigger than 1 foot at a time, but that will certainly change the dynamic. I recommend you start stable though, because if you start already moving, you lose out on the skill that we're building. But now Randy's going to come out, and these two will play a bit of double-bitted stick. Jake, swing to your left just a little bit, other way. There we go, right there. And begin. There we go, good. Now, especially if you're doing this in just a fencing mask, it may warrant, especially if you're starting off and looking to use a helmet, you'll want to practice this with your eyes closed on occasion, but not required, not at all. This should be something you can do for a long period of time, so don't burn yourself out too quickly. Yeah, there we go. And certainly, as well as you're wearing more armor and become more comfortable, you can also start looking at more actively targeting at each other instead of just looking to off balance. Another great option for this would be causing the hands to separate. As if you can get both hands off the sword, you've got a wonderful option. That was good. All right, let's hold on that one. Because that also illustrates another good point. During that bout, Randy and Jake ended up switching binding positions. So with Jake and I starting off this way, we started left hand up, right hand down. During that, Jake ended up over here, so we were right hand up, left hand down. After you've practiced the standard way, you should switch over and practice this way, both left foot forward and then right foot forward. And you should do the same with your right foot forward on this side, just to develop yourself in all 4 planes of motion. But that's going to be double-bitted stick. You can also work up to doing this with, of course, spears and things along those lines, but that changes things just a little bit. Okay, next game is a very, very fun game. This is one that you already should know how to do if you're a fan of the channel. It's called Step Drill. So for Step Drill, the idea here is those were our 2 games for baseline skills. This is now where you can start applying things in a slower setting. This is a very good warm-up drill. Or alternatively, if you're not necessarily feeling very energetic that day, this is the closest to a free exercise that you can get without burning too much gas. But the idea here is going to be Jake and I can both start in whatever position we want. There's going to be a predetermined fencer A, fencer B. So in this case, I'll go ahead and be fencer B since Jake's a little more ready. And the idea is he's going to attack into my opening, make contact, and then reset. And he's going to attack that opening over and over again, trying to maintain as much consistency and efficiency as he can. Because halfway through that, he may determine, hey, or I maybe as a training partner, I point out, hey Jake, what if you did a gathering step rather than launch? Oh yeah, that's a lot scarier, that's a lot more powerful. And if he likes that, he can keep that. If he doesn't, he doesn't. But when he's ready, he tells me it's my turn to move. On this turn, I'm going to defend myself and then work my point in. And we reset, and we do that again. Each person's going to get 3 turns. So Jake gets to set the pace by going first. I possibly get the last shot. On your turn, you must both defend yourself and hit your opponent with quality. And with armor especially, that's going to be a big thing, because you may not always be able to get a quality shot. Like, let's look at that example again for a minute. So maybe I can get this parry, but I can never get enough pressure to push in because of something. Then I need to make sure that I am taking that time to really ensure that point can do something. If I can't, I'm probably better off just going ahead and leaving and ending the drill. But step drill is relatively straightforward. It's one you should be pretty familiar with. Moving it over to armor isn't too difficult. The other benefit of going over into armor is that you can start using other grips a lot more. So for example, maybe we square up, but it's my turn to move first. Since we're going slow and we're being nice, I'll go ahead and lead with a Mortschlag or things along those lines. If you have daggers on you, you can pull those. There's a lot of fun that you can do. Now, I'd have Randy and Jake demonstrate this, but we don't have that much time, so we'll skip this one and move on. Now, our final game is going to be Don't Get Stabbed. This is a great game. The idea here is that you have an attacker and a defender. All you're looking to do is not get stabbed. So the attacker's job is you're trying to make efficient attacks, but your job isn't to just blitz, right? If I'm attacking Jake, what I'm looking to do is I'm looking to get him looking other places and just exploit what I can get, right? I'm not going to go constantly, right? I'm wanting to take my time and drive Jake, since he's going to be on the back foot, and work my way in, right? Now, Jake, meanwhile, his job is to avoid that, mostly by movement, but also occasionally by parrying. So, as we've already seen, he's starting to close off guards when I try to take fun angles, right? If I do look like I'm pushing up, he can push back, etc. And this should be, again, you're not looking to run away because you will quickly run out of distance. What you're looking for is locking down the scary part. So if Jake can, right, and hold me there, he can absolutely step up to me, right? It's very difficult for me to stab him from here. This is a good, safe place for him to go that is going to force me to go, okay, fine, Jake. I'll break distance for now, and I'll come back to you later. And this will build good habits between you. Randy, I'll also have you jump in. Now this also, you can play mixed armor. So, for example, Jake here is in a full helmet. Randy's obviously not. Jake has mail here. Randy doesn't. Depending upon who you're training with or what you're training for, like maybe that's all the armor that Randy owns, but we're going to go fight in a mixed armor melee. He needs to learn to guard all those different parts of him. So you can make this more or less complicated, but for now, let's say you're playing equal, okay? So, go ahead and why don't we have Randy as the attacker? Begin. Okay. Now what you can also do is you can add point values basically. So you could, for example, say, hey, 5 good thrusts, and we'll switch roles or what have you. You could put a target of priority. For example, let's say you could focus on the palm of the hand. You could focus on going for the armpit, focus on the face. You could also turn this into don't get stabbed, but then there's also setups for throw. There's a lot of great opportunities that you can use. Good, thank you, gentlemen. Now, what you can also do from here is you can start looking into making this asymmetrical. So, for example, if we want to really kind of build this into something more advanced, if you become familiar with the sword, you could have it so the attacker has to be in bloss grip. You could also have it so the defender has to be in bloss grip. You could have the attacker be using a spear. You could have the defender have to defend themselves in the Mortschlag grip. That one's a lot of fun because you're stuck in a grip and that makes things a lot harder. You can have the defender be using only a dagger. You could have the attacker be using a dagger. You can really kind of build this and tailor it how you want. You can also, of course, put conditions down like, right now we're using the confines of the list, etc. Bunch of fun opportunities there. But all these games can escalate within each other as well. So, for example, let's talk about following the leader again, the very first game. With time, you can start turning that into also light, don't get stabbed. So, for example, if I'm moving Jake around and he's keeping distance with me, but like right now his tip's really high, I can just occasionally launch a little attack and he'll have to be ready to defend, or things along those lines. Or maybe he's gotten very used to really over-pushing when I come in. I come forward and say, hey, look at that, right? Lots of opportunities there. In regards to double bit stick, like I said, sometimes when you're playing don't get stabbed, you may need to do that. Like Jake comes in with an attack, I manage to parry it. Hey, look, now we're here again. I need to use those skill sets to keep myself safe. Jake is trying to worm his way in and get his point back online. I'm using that to buy myself time. These skills will all build upon each other. As for step drill then, after a while, if you've got some attacks and don't get stabbed that you feel very comfortable with, try using them as your opening salvos in step drill, and then build upon it to see what else you can get. But all these games are absolutely wonderful and very easy to do. Along with this, you should of course be practicing the basics out of a source. Any armor source will work well. I'll give you more ideas of things to try, and you can also start blending those in with these games. But these 4 exercises in particular are excellent for getting you started. And like I said, you do not have to be in full gear to do so. Well, okay, you need to be in full HEMA gear, but you don't need to be in full armor to do so. But really, you'll get the most out of it if you at least have a pair of gauntlets. Some form of helmet does increase that posture, but not always required. Like, for example, right now I'm in an open-face helmet. I would stick to doing things like, step drill or technique work. Double bit stick maybe in this, but if I'm doing like don't get stabbed or what have you, I'll put on a fencing mask. And then the breastplate really does help significantly, but a breastplate's also very easy to jury rig, basically. You don't need metal. It can be anything that just denies target area. But with these games, it should give you a good leg up in, hey, how do we practice harness? This will help significantly, and along with that, your regular technique reading. Otherwise, thank you very, very much, Jake. Thank you very, very much, Randy. And thank you all very much for watching. And we will go over some other techniques another time.